He used my mug. Not just any mug. My mug. The one with the faded blue rim and the tiny crack near the handle I always swore I'd glue but never did. It was chipped, stained from years of coffee and late nights, and it sat in the back of the cabinet where no one touched it, because everyone knew it was mine. But there he was, in my kitchen, in my chair, drinking from my mug. He didn't ask. He didn't even look around for permission. He just reached past the clean, polished ones and picked that one, like it meant nothing. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a casual visit. It wasn't a quick stop, a work thing, or some mistake. It was deliberate. And when Serafina strolled down the stairs, towel wrapped around her like she was in a resort, not our home, I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my thoughts louder than the room, screaming at me to wake up from whatever surreal mess this was. "Lowell," she said, surprised like she'd forgotten I existed. "Didn't expect you to be home so early." Early? I've been working from home every Thursday for 4 years. The calendar on the fridge said it in bold letters. She knew that. I glanced at him. Bryson, her boss. The guy who shook hands like he was doing you a favor. The guy who took off his shoes at the door, but then tracked mud straight across my woven rug anyway. He looked up from his coffee and said, "Great place. Cozy. Cozy." I swallowed the burn rising in my throat. "That's my mug." He blinked. "Oh," he said, then took another sip. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to explain. She just walked up behind him, rested a hand on his shoulder, and looked at me like I was in the way. Like I'd become the extra in my own life. Then, as if she were delivering a line from a well-rehearsed play, she said, "He's a man, Lowell, and you're just so." She trailed off, let the silence do the rest. That unfinished sentence sliced through me worse than anything else ever could. She didn't even have the decency to lie. I stood there, watching them. Her smirking. Him sipping. Me unraveling. And something deep in my chest clicked, not like a switch, but like a lock being unlatched after years of being stuck. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just nodded, turned, and left. Not out the front door. No. I walked down into the basement. Quiet. Calm. I opened the plastic storage bin behind the water heater. The one she always told me to toss because it smelled weird. I pulled out the notebook I hadn't touched since college. Back when I used to dream of becoming a screenwriter. Back when I knew how to tell a story, with tension, betrayal, climax, and resolution. By the time I heard the front door close behind them, I had already written 6 pages. Not of dialogue or revenge plans, but of everything I had allowed. Every moment I bit my tongue. Every time I stepped aside so she could have her space. Every moment I thought I was being supportive when really I was just being erased, one compromise at a time. I hadn't written in over 15 years. Life had a way of squeezing creativity out of you. It made your world smaller and louder and more demanding until dreaming felt indulgent. But that night, in the cold basement air, sitting on a plastic crate, I wrote with purpose. This wasn't about publishing. It wasn't about art. It was about telling the truth, for once, finally, and brutally. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I reread emails, messages, hotel confirmations, things I had once scrolled past because trusting her felt safer than questioning her. The pieces were all there. She hadn't even tried that hard to hide it. Late meetings. Emergency weekend conferences. A sudden new gym membership she swore was about mental clarity. I laughed out loud when I saw a receipt for a candlelit dinner labeled client decompression. They really thought they were clever. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She walked into the kitchen humming. Made a smoothie. Even left me a little post-it note on the fridge. "You okay? You seemed weird last night. Let's talk later. Love, S." The audacity of that heart symbol made me dizzy. I didn't answer. I just stared at her from my spot by the living room window, watching as she gathered her keys and kissed her phone instead of me on the way out the door. She didn't even notice the storage bin was missing from the basement, or that the notebook was gone from the cabinet where I kept old tax records. She never noticed much unless it was missing from her world. But here's the part one haven't said yet. I wasn't alone in planning my story. See, a few weeks ago, Serafina asked me to help update her laptop. She wanted it to run smoother, whatever that means. I backed it up, like always. But this time, I didn't just update her OS. I cloned everything. Email, browser history, deleted files, cache, all of it. I didn't do it because I suspected her back then. I did it because I'm the kind of guy who cares too much, prepares too much, and assumes everyone else is as honest as he is. And yet, when I opened that folder on my own desktop, I found things that turned my stomach. Not just messages to Bryson. Messages to others. 2 others, to be exact. One was some guy named Chad who worked in sales at her previous company. The other? A married neighbor from across the cul-de-sac. Yeah, the same one who borrowed my drill and never gave it back. That was when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a pattern, and I had been enabling it. The hardest part? It wasn't the affairs. It was the language she used about me. The jokes she made. The way she described me to them. Like I was a neutered pet who cooked and paid the Wi-Fi bill. She once wrote, "Lowell's harmless. He wouldn't even leave if he caught me in bed with someone else. He'd probably make us tea." She was wrong. I started by emailing copies of the evidence to a secure drive with a timed release script in case anything happened to me. Paranoia? Maybe. But I wasn't taking chances anymore. Then I made a phone call to her company's anonymous ethics hotline. I kept my voice calm, detached, even kind. I simply asked what their policy was for senior employees engaging in repeated relationships with subordinates, particularly when company travel budgets were being used for those conferences. They said they'd look into it. That was day one. The plan wasn't just revenge. It was exposure, humiliation in slow motion. Not for the sake of cruelty, but for the sake of truth. And because I wanted her to know, the man she mocked, the harmless one, was finally done being quiet. It took 3 days before I saw the cracks start to show. Serafina came home late on Monday. Hair windblown, heels in hand, lipstick smudged in a way that told me more than her silence ever could. She walked in, dumped her bag on the bench, and went straight to the fridge. She pulled out the leftover chicken I had made, stuffed with garlic and lemon zest, and ate it cold, standing by the sink, like nothing in the world required warmth or acknowledgement anymore. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't need to. Instead, I asked something different. Is Bryson your only boss, or are there others you bring home when I'm not around? She paused mid-bite. Her jaw tensed, then relaxed. She gave me a side glance. You're being paranoid, she said casually. Don't start creating problems. I smiled, but it wasn't the smile she was used to. This one held teeth. You're right. I shouldn't create problems. I should just clean them up. She didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but I could tell something about my tone landed differently. Her eyes flickered. Her mouth opened slightly, maybe to ask something, but she didn't. She just tossed the chicken bone in the trash, grabbed her phone, and floated upstairs as if I were background noise again. But I wasn't. Not anymore. That night, while she slept with one leg kicked out of the blanket and her phone charging under the pillow like a secret, I sat in the downstairs office and wrote an email that I must have reworded 17 times before hitting send. It was addressed to one of the board members at her company, a woman named Celeste who had liked a photo of me and Serafina once at a holiday party. I remembered that because Celeste had commented, "power couple," and Serafina deleted it later. Said it was too cringe. I thought it was sweet. My message to Celeste wasn't angry. It wasn't vindictive. It was factual. It outlined several policy violations. It listed dates, receipts, travel records, and hotel overlaps between Serafina and her direct reports. I didn't use colorful language. I didn't accuse. I simply invited them to review internally and noted that I had already made a report through the anonymous channel. Then I attached a document. I called it Professional Discrepancies. Inside were screen captures, carefully chosen, deeply damaging. Not intimate in the inappropriate sense, but inappropriate in the corporate sense. Messages about expensing personal trips as client scouting. Jokes about HR blind spots. And most notably, a direct quote from Serafina to Bryson. "Don't worry, I trained my husband like a dog. He won't bite." I didn't even have to hit send. I scheduled it, Friday, 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the weekly department leadership meeting. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was what I had delivered 2 days earlier without her noticing. You see, Serafina's company loved appearances. Every quarter, they did these internal spotlight features on staff. Success stories, challenges overcome, personal reflections. She'd always said it was for corporate propaganda, but she secretly loved being in them. So, I submitted a spotlight story. About me. Under a pseudonym, of course. It was titled, "When Home Isn't Safe. Living with a Partner Who Weaponizes Power." I framed it like fiction, like an essay about a nameless man whose partner controlled every part of their life. Finances, intimacy, even perception. A man who smiled in public, but fell asleep to the sound of another man's laughter upstairs. A man who thought silence was strength, until silence became surrender. I embedded subtle but unmistakable details. Phrases Serafina had used. The layout of our home. A mention of the chipped blue mug. Anyone who knew her well would connect the dots. Anyone who didn't would ask questions. It was set to be shared on the company's internal network next week. By then, the investigation would be underway. Bryson would be sweating through his designer suits. And Serafina? She'd still be calling me safe. Still believing she had control. But the thing about safe men? When we stop protecting you, the world feels very, very dangerous. And for once, I wasn't going to warn her. Friday morning began with rain, the kind that taps gently on windows like a polite warning. Serafina hated rain, said it made her hair frizz and her mood spiral. But this time, she seemed unusually upbeat. She danced through the kitchen barefoot, wearing my old university sweatshirt like it meant nothing, humming along to a playlist she used to say was too soft. She didn't notice that I hadn't said a word. She didn't notice my eyes tracking her every move, or the fact that my laptop was open, screen dimmed, displaying the scheduled email I was just minutes away from releasing into her world. At 8:54 a.m., I casually stood, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and said, "You might want to check your inbox in a minute." She gave me a puzzled look, but didn't take me seriously. Why would she? I was harmless, remember? The man who made tea when he should have been flipping tables. By the time the clock turned 8:55, the email had launched. I sipped my coffee. 2 minutes later, she picked up her phone. Her eyes scanned the screen. Then again. Her thumbs tapped fast, erratic. Her expression shifted, from bored to blank, then flickered into something I hadn't seen in years. Panic. "Lol," she said quietly, still staring at her phone. What did you do?" I leaned against the counter, savoring the moment like it was the first warm sip of a drink I'd waited a decade to taste. "I think your office is going to have a very interesting meeting today," I replied. She blinked hard. You emailed them?" "No," I said slowly. "I reported you. With receipts. And I backed up everything before you think about deleting anything. It's already off-site. It's already safe." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, Serafina didn't have a comeback. No smirk. No smug rebuttal. Just the faint tremor of someone who finally understood what it felt like to be exposed. "You ruined me," she whispered, voice cracking. I tilted my head. "Did I? Or did you just finally see what you've been doing to yourself?" She ran upstairs without another word. Her footsteps were frantic this time. No grace. No power. Just noise. A loud, chaotic retreat. Moments later, I heard drawers open, zippers, the rustle of clothes. She was packing. Of course she was. She always ran when the stage lights turned against her. While she panicked, I walked into my home office and picked up the small metal box I had locked away months earlier. Inside was a flash drive, a printed document, and a photograph. The flash drive contained a full image of her laptop's contents. The document? A summary of the policy violations and a timeline that lined up perfectly with her company travel records. And the photo? That one hurt. It was from our second anniversary. We were laughing on a boat near Cape Cod. She had her head on my shoulder, hair whipping across my face, and I was smiling like someone who still believed forever was real. I held it for a moment, then placed it face down on the desk. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Calhoun," a woman's voice asked. "This is Celeste from Serafina's HR division. I'd like to schedule a call with you as soon as possible." I smiled. "I'll make time." By the time I walked back into the kitchen, Serafina was standing there with a suitcase by her feet, mascara smudged, hair tied up in the way she only did when she was in survival mode. "I don't know how you did this," she said through clenched teeth. "But I swear to God, you don't know who you're messing with." I looked her straight in the eye, the way I wish I had all those years ago. "Oh, Serafina," I said. "You have no idea who you've been messing with." She left without another word. As the door clicked shut behind her, the rain stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. I sat down with my coffee, warm and bitter, and opened the document titled Phase 2. Because I wasn't done yet. I spent the rest of that Friday in silence. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because it was finally her turn to answer questions. As far as I could tell, Serafina went straight to her boss after she stormed out. That meant she walked right into a room full of leadership colleagues who had just read the email that cracked her corporate mask wide open. I imagined the awkward greetings, the heavy silences, the squirming in chairs as she tried to pretend it was all some smear campaign. But it wouldn't work. The documentation I sent didn't just tell a story, it proved it. Dates, times, reimbursements, her own words. And the fictional story I'd submitted to the company blog? They published it. Apparently, one of the editors found it raw and important. I received an automated thank you message from the internal newsletter team. I laughed for a full minute when I saw it in my inbox. I knew it would hit screens across the company by Monday morning, but it was already being forwarded around unofficially. Someone had printed it out and left it on the office coffee bar, according to a message a friend of mine screenshotted and sent me with the caption, "Isn't this about your wife?" I responded with a thumbs up. That weekend, things started to shift outside our home too. It began with a couple of awkward hellos. The neighbor across the street, Laura, avoided eye contact. Her husband, Ron, gave me a subtle nod while he watered their lawn, like he knew something but didn't want to get involved. That was fine. I wasn't looking for allies. But the mood had changed. I could feel it in the way people watched me a second longer than usual, or whispered a beat too late after I passed them on the sidewalk. Then on Sunday morning, something strange happened. I was bringing in the trash cans when I noticed a note taped to our mailbox. It wasn't signed. The handwriting was neat and deliberate. "You deserved better. Some of us knew. We're sorry." I stood there for a while, rereading it. Someone knew. Some of them knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to suspect what had been happening behind the pristine smiles and picturesque perfect parties. By Sunday evening, a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, I don't want to be involved, but I thought you should know Serafina used our HOA funds to cover a networking dinner for her boss and a few others. It was questionable. Just in case you're gathering info." I was. See, I hadn't told you about Phase 2 yet. While the first phase was about exposing the affair and her misuse of power in the corporate world, Phase 2 was about dismantling the image she had built around us locally. Serafina was the chair of the HOA social committee. She managed budgets, planned the block parties, organized cleanup days. Everyone thought she was the glue of the neighborhood. They didn't know that glue was cheap and cracked under pressure. I began cross-referencing the HOA's digital records. Everything was technically public, but no one ever really paid attention. I found dozens of little discrepancies. Catering overcharges. Event receipts submitted twice. Consulting fees to vendors who didn't exist. It was subtle, carefully done, but once you lined it all up, the picture was undeniable. I put it all in a folder. Titled it Community Matters. I wasn't in a rush. That was the key. No explosions. No screaming matches. Just a slow drip of truth. Let her sweat. Let her scramble. Let her wonder when and where the next blow would land. By Monday morning, the fallout had officially begun. She was suspended from her job pending an internal investigation. I knew because she called me for times. I didn't answer. She sent a message. "We need to talk. This is spiraling. Please, Lowell." That was new. Please. I left it unread. Around noon, I received an email from the HOA president asking if I could hop on a quick call. His tone was polite. Nervous. Curious. I could already guess what it was about. I waited an hour, then replied. "Sure. I have a few things to share too." As I closed my laptop, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Same tired eyes. Same messy hair. But something looked different. Not stronger, exactly, but less faded. Like someone had turned the saturation up on a life that had been grayscale for too long. She called me safe. Said I wouldn't even bark. She forgot. Some dogs don't bark. They wait. And then they bite. By Tuesday morning, Serafina had returned, though not to beg, not to apologize. No, she walked in like she still owned the air in the house. She had this tightly wound bun on her head, designer sunglasses, and a trench coat she only wore when she wanted to feel important. She set down her bag with theatrical delicacy and stood across from me in the living room as if she were preparing for a negotiation. "I'm staying here until this blows over," she said, her tone clipped, her voice missing that forced warmth she used on neighbors and interns. "I've spoken with legal. They'll sort out the misunderstanding at work, but in the meantime, I'll need access to my files, my laptop, and my office." I didn't flinch. "Your laptop was company property. They took it back, remember?" She exhaled, visibly irritated. "Fine. Then I'll use mine." "No, you won't," I said simply. "Because I've disconnected the router and locked down the guest access. Until the investigation is over, I won't let you tamper with anything. You lied, manipulated people, and stole. You can stay here for now, but only as long as you understand. This isn't your fortress anymore. She glared at me like she wanted to slap the air out of my lungs. But she didn't. She turned, marched up the stairs, and slammed the bedroom door so hard a painting in the hallway tilted sideways. I left it that way. That day, the HOA meeting happened. It was a video call, small and informal, just me, Harold, the HOA president, and Cynthia from down the block, who was surprisingly direct for someone who once cried at a puppy adoption booth. I had my screen shared, documents laid out, names and numbers highlighted. I didn't dramatize it. I walked them through each piece like I was presenting a puzzle that solved itself if you just connected the lines. When I finished, Harold looked exhausted. How long have you had this? Since Friday, I said. He nodded, clearly overwhelmed. Cynthia leaned forward in her camera frame and asked, "Do you want us to vote her out? Or are you trying to resolve this privately?" I paused, just long enough to let it sting. No. I want this public. I want it documented in the minutes. I want the neighborhood to know. Silence. Then Harold said, "Understood." That evening, I printed a copy of the HOA complaint packet and slid it under Serafina's door. No note. No words. Just the truth on paper, ready to be read or ignored. She didn't come out for dinner. But at around midnight, I heard the soft creak of the stairs. I stayed in the kitchen, sipping tea, when she appeared, barefoot, face pale, makeup removed. Not a trace of the polished, powerful woman she used to parade around. She stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" I set the mug down and met her gaze. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just done protecting you from the things you've already done to yourself." She swallowed hard. "I made mistakes, but this is excessive. You're ruining my life, Lowell." My laugh was dry. "You called me safe. You made me invisible in our own home. You paraded your boss around like I was a doorman. You didn't just cheat. You mocked me for staying loyal. So no, I'm not ruining your life. I'm just finally refusing to help you lie about who you are." Her eyes welled up, but she wiped them quickly, not out of shame, out of anger. "You'll regret this," she said. "I already regret every time I believed you'd never do this to me." She turned and left the room. No more words. No more posturing. The next morning, her car was gone. But something else was left behind. On the kitchen table, her wedding ring. And a sticky note underneath it that simply read, "Don't follow me." I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing the next message for her board of directors. Because Phase 3 was ready. And this time, it wasn't just about justice. It was about making sure her mask never fit again. By the time the sun had fully stretched over the backyard, I'd already read her note 6 times. I don't know why. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't even angry. It just said, "Don't follow me." That was it. No signature, no apology, no plea for understanding. Just a final command written on a yellow square with the same handwriting she used for grocery lists. And beside it, the ring, our wedding ring, resting in a pool of quiet contempt on the polished oak we once sanded together. I didn't touch it. Not at first. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching the sunlight hit the diamonds she insisted were ethically sourced, remembering how proud she was of picking out something so evolved. But now, that same ring looked hollow. Like a prop left behind after the final act of a one-woman play no one enjoyed. When I finally picked it up, it felt lighter than it should have. Or maybe I'd just grown heavier. I placed it in the drawer with the warranty documents and the picture from Cape Cod face down, again, and sat at my desk to finish what I'd started. Phase 3 wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about rebuilding the truth, brick by brick, and burning down the rot she left behind. The email I drafted to her board was meticulously worded. I framed it not as a husband, but as a concerned citizen. I outlined not just the romantic misconduct, but the financial inconsistencies, the ethical breaches, the way she'd used company resources to leverage personal relationships. It was dry, formal, and impossible to ignore. Then I took it a step further. I attached a brief statement from a former intern who had reached out to me over the weekend. A young woman named Joelle. She had worked under Serafina the previous summer and described being sidelined, dismissed, and eventually told that networking with the right people mattered more than talent. She never said it directly, but her implication was clear. Serafina didn't just blur boundaries, she erased them. When I asked Joelle why she came forward, she replied, "Because I saw your post on the company blog. It was brave. And because I didn't want to stay quiet like you did for so long." That cut deeper than anything Serafina ever said. Because it was true. I had stayed quiet. I had believed that silence equaled peace, that keeping things smooth was love. But love without truth isn't love, it's hostage negotiation. I had sinned. Then I stood up, took a deep breath, and finally did something I'd been avoiding for years. I called my brother. We hadn't spoken much since Mom's funeral. Life had gotten loud, and I had gotten small. But as soon as he answered, I said, I need to get out of this house for a while. He didn't hesitate. Come stay with us. The guest room's yours. Before I left, I went room to room, silent, methodical, gathering only what was mine. My books, my grandfather's watch, the old typewriter I swore I'd fix one day. I left the big things. The TV, the dishes, the furniture we bought during a Black Friday frenzy when we were still pretending to be happy. I didn't want them. They were hers, even if my name was on the receipt. But I did take one last thing. That damned blue mug. The one her boss had the nerve to use like it meant nothing. The one that saw more of my real life than Serafina ever did. It wasn't about the ceramic. It was about reclaiming the pieces of me I had surrendered without a fight. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back. Not even once. There was no slow cinematic moment of hesitation, no whisper of nostalgia. Just the steady hum of tires rolling away from the wreckage. That night, I slept in a bed that didn't smell like lice. And the next morning, I woke up to 5 unread emails. One from her. One from her attorney. 3 from former coworkers I'd never met, thanking me. Her message was the shortest. You've destroyed me. No greeting. No punctuation. Just those 3 words. And all I could think was, good. Now maybe you'll finally understand what you did to me first. But the story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Because what Serafina didn't know was that someone else had been watching everything unfold. Someone who knew her even better than I did. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks without her voice filling the halls, without the sharp clicking of her heels across the floor, without the constant performance of perfection she used to carry like a crown. And in that quiet absence, I found something I didn't realize I'd been missing for years, my own voice. The fallout from my disclosures continued to ripple outward, but I didn't watch it like some revenge-fueled spectator anymore. I let it run its course. The board of directors initiated a full ethics review. Bryson, unsurprisingly, resigned to pursue other opportunities. Serafina was placed on indefinite leave. Her polished LinkedIn page suddenly went dark. The HOA removed her with a unanimous vote. A public notice was posted on the bulletin board outside the clubhouse, an objective list of misused funds and misrepresented expenses. Her name wasn't slandered. It was simply documented, as it should have been. I wasn't gloating. I was healing. Living with my brother gave me the space to breathe, to eat without tension in my chest, to speak without choosing my words like landmines. His kids dragged me into board games and backyard bonfires. One evening, his daughter handed me a drawing of a dog wearing glasses and said, "This is you if you were a superhero." I asked her what my power was. She said, "You tell the truth even when it's hard." That hit harder than anything Serafina ever threw at me. It wasn't long before I started writing again, not just emails or damage control, but actual writing. Short stories, character sketches, observations, things I thought I'd lost the ability to create. A friend from college read one of my pieces and told me she was starting a community workshop. She asked if I'd consider leading a weekly group for adults trying to rediscover their creativity. I said yes. And that's where I met Iris. No, this isn't some fairy tale new love after heartbreak ending. Iris didn't sweep in with romantic fireworks or dramatic declarations. She brought coffee, real conversation, patience. She asked questions that made me think, not apologize. She read my story about the chipped mug and said, "It's not about the mug, you know. It's about everything you gave away without asking for anything back." She was right. So I stopped giving myself away. I moved into a small townhome not far from my brother's place. It's not flashy. The floorboards still creak. But it's mine. I chose the colors. I set the rhythm. I drink from the blue mug every morning, now with full awareness of its cracks, and I like it better that way. Serafina never came back to the house. Her attorney handled the paperwork. We finalized the divorce quietly. No court drama. Just the final breath of a life that had already stopped meaning anything long before the papers were signed. I never responded to her last message. "You've destroyed me." It wasn't mine to answer. Because I hadn't destroyed her. I'd simply stopped protecting the illusion. And in doing so, I saved myself. Sometimes people will try to make you feel small so they can feel tall beside you. Sometimes they'll mistake your kindness for weakness, your patience for ignorance, your love for servitude. But you are not small. You are not weak. You are not invisible. You are the author of your own story. And mine, after everything, has finally found peace.